So how did you come to be at Clay's Park? Did you just see an ad in the paper that there was an opening there, or you knew people who went there? You decided it would be nice to work, or?
My first year at Jackson High School was in 73-74 school year. And I said to myself, I had switched majors about my sophomore year. And decided I had all them courses, and I decided I didn't want to be a business major, so I switched majors. I lost some courses switching that wouldn't apply to an education degree, so I had some making up to do. So I was going summers and everything. Well, when I landed a job at Jackson, I had decided in the spring, I'm not doing anything, man. I'm taking the summer off. I'm going to chill, because paychecks ran all summer. And I'll never forget Tom McKee, the physics teacher. He'd come up to me, and they used to call me Catman, Cat Stevens and Stevie. And he says, "Hey, Stevie, what are you doing this summer?" I said, "I'm going to sit under a tree. I'm going to drink beer and enjoy myself and whatever." I probably add a little bit more to that, but I won't put it in there for family reasons. But he said, "Hey, how would you like to do all that and make money?" And I said, "What, sit under a tree, drink beer, and make money?" I said, "More money," and he said, "More money per month than you do teaching." And I go, "There's not such a job out there." Well, he did. The way he described it was a little misleading, but his point was he had the waterfront director's job at Clay's. Tom was also a swim coach for Jackson. I think that was a good, probably a criteria for getting him in over at Clay's, plus his supervisor experience with young people being a teacher and his training. Well, he says, "Look, I'm going to go to grad school." And he says, "I got this job at a place called Clay's Park, and I'm over the lifeguards." And he said, "And I'll tell you what, it's a good job. It's good, clean atmosphere." He said, "I think you ought to interview. You'd be good for it. It'd be great." And I said, "Tom, I don't have any swimming credentials." I said, "I can barely swim." He goes, No. Your teaching background and that will lend itself, that's what, you need to be a supervisor and an overseer." And he said, "You'll have a head lifeguard that will have all the detail, have all the water criteria. All you need to do is oversee." Oh, sounds good. Never heard of Clay's Park, by the way. So he says, "Hey, I'll tell him about you." So I get an interview. And I'll never forget, it was in the house where John and Peggy live. John had come up, and there was a fire going. And I interviewed with Mr. Clay, and then I also interviewed with your grandpa. And I was more nervous for some reason with your grandpa than I was with John O. And I don't know why to this day, but they were both very nice, and they both commanded, you don't joke around, this is serious, and so on, very, very professional. But I was selected. So I started out, and the rest is history.
So the interview took place at a fire, you said? Like they had a fire out?
Mr. Clay had a fire in his fireplace.
Oh, okay.
I call it the plantation house.
The brick house.
Brick house. And I'll never forget, because it was nice and warm, and he was sitting in there, and he might have been puffing on his pipe. Now, when I interviewed then, because I had two,
Yeah.
when I interviewed them with your grandpa, that was up at his place.
Across the street.
And that was, honestly, it wasn't as that's probably what a little more the intimidation was. It wasn't quite as a laid back, like a fire and a comfortable chair kind of thing. It was pretty much, I believe, if they have a library or an office setting, it was more of a business atmosphere kind of thing. And that might have been the part that kind of intimidated me a little bit. But no, I got the job, and geez, I said, this is it. I mean, my first year there, I thought, I kept having to pinch myself.
Yeah.
I'm getting paid to do this. I mean, I'm getting paid. And I used to kid them and say if they could ever afford someone full time after that first year, because they told me that they would like to have me back. So I was kind of set for the next year.
Yeah.
But
So
it was
would that have been 75, 76?
it would have been in 74, 75 then, because I think my first year there was 73 summer.
Okay.
So it would have been 74 summer, and then it went on then, I believe, 5 seasons or 6, something like that, and then I ended up in the full-time.
Because I think my dad started working their summers being a teacher also, that he started there 75, 76, working his summers out there.
And you know, I remember a lot of the people, but not because I was only a seasonal person. I didn't hang around much. I mean, once my job was done there, and I didn't hang around much. Came back and hung with my own group and all that stuff. But on in, I think then maybe after the second or third year, as I got to know some of the people up at the gate were repeaters, like your father and the Roaches and the Fudges and Ernie, old Ernie Bloomfield, those people. Then I started to have more dialogue. Your Uncle Rick, Mike, you know, I started to get more dialogue with those guys too, and some of the lifeguards that were older. Because when I started, Rob Lynn was a head lifeguard. Rob was only a year younger than I, but there were, I think, maybe 6 or 7 college-age guards, and then a lot of high school are getting ready to go into college. And campers. A lot of them were coming out of the campground. And Massillon, Washington had a swim team back then that furnished quite a few lifeguard candidates too, because they had already taken life-saving and that stuff, so they were already certified and all that. But yeah, that, I mean, great job. I mean, to supplement teaching, it was, and then I even got rolled into the Yankee Peddler scenario too, where, hey, you want to make some extra money, and again, supplemented the income.
Which continues to this day. The
Well,
Yankee Peddler
true,
stuff.
true.
Bobby Apple and everybody.
40 some years later, and I'm still affiliated and on the surface with them. So yeah.
Yeah. So that actually kind of dovetails into the next question: is how did you meet Diana? Which I know the answer to that, but you know, you met Diana and all them, and got married eventually, and you can go forward with that.
Well, met Diana at Clay's. Her and her sister Karen and her best friend Donna came down swimming. I guess Diana's family, I learned this, of course, along the way after I met her family. They used to come down in the summers off and on in would have been probably the late 60s and early 70s when she was a teenager, camping and meet relatives from Pennsylvania and whatnot. Well, her and her girlfriend Donna and Karen decided they were going to come down here the week that they were all on vacation, which would have been in that year 75 summer. And I, after 3 or 4 summers, had gotten a pretty good idea of the regulars that were there at the park. The Hilberts, the Roushes with their families and their kids, and the Harrises from the campground, and a lot of those people. But I kind of got to know pretty regularly the daily people that would come in, the swimming people, on a regular basis. Now, weekends, there would be a lot of different people because people were off work. But through the week, family memberships and whatnot, so I kind of got to know the dynamics of the beach. Well, that one week, when Diana and her sister and Donna showed up, I saw 3 young ladies that I hadn't seen before, and I specifically remember Diana having a yellow 2-piece bathing suit, and I said, whoa, I got to meet this girl. And she wasn't real friendly at first when I went up. In fact, all week that they came down, I spent more time talking to her sister Karen than I did Diana. I really, there were things I watched about your uncle, John, that I was quite admirable. He didn't always agree with him, but his mannerisms and the way he handled things always seemed to, after I give him some thought, intrigue me. I'll give you an example. We're sitting at the gate one day, and if I told you this, I apologize. We're sitting at the gate one day. He's there, I'm up there. Now this is when I'm full-time. Guy comes up, camper, and he's irate. He just going off. Mr. Clay asked how he could help, and he says, I want to talk to, and yada, 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 yada. Mr. Clay lets him air the deal and says, well, now, who do I see about this? And John O goes, right there, this guy, and walked out. He went, right here. Here's the guy that's going to help you. Now here's the guy that owns the place that could have done everything imaginable, and he went like that. And then another time, when he came up to me and he says, puffing on his pipe, plantation hat on, Mike Stevens, tell me a little bit about this motorcycle Annie. And I said, oh, this ought to be good. I said, well, she cleans the restrooms for us. She is widowed, divorced, all the above. So what I was trying to paint the picture bright and early is she needs this job, because I was trying to think where he was going with it. Because he says, well, I was out at the Melody Barn and I was watching what was going on with the picnic, and here this lady comes around the corner, and she's kind of weaving and walking and weaving, and I noticed she had a beer in her hand. And I noticed she had a Clays Park staff shirt on. Uh-oh. So I watch her get on this scooter, and I watch her drive off across the Melody Barn field. So I'm on my golf cart and I follow her. And he said, and all of a sudden I noticed she was driving like she was walking, and then boom, she wiped out. So I said, well, Annie, and I explained about the restrooms, and she overall does a good job. I said, she oftentimes, like some of the rest of us, and I threw myself right into the fire, get caught up in the ambience of partying and all that stuff. And I said, so I'll talk to her. And he said, yeah, I think you better. He said, and tell her if she is going to have a beer, not to be in a Clays Park staff shirt. I said, okay. So that kind of a charisma just used to fascinate me. How he would when he asked me some questions that he somewhat already knew the answer. And I hope I don't bore you, but I'll leave you with one more. Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly, I remember Mr. Kelly.
He says to me one day, Mike Stevens, Mr. Kelly, what's he do here? So I told him all the stuff he does and how he's my eyes and ears and behind the scenes. He says, well, does he have a drinking problem? And I said, no, I don't think so. He said, well, I was talking to him out here one morning early, and he smelled of alcohol. And I said, well, what time of the morning was that? And he said, 9:30, 10 o'clock. And I said, well, let me check into that. Because, man, I didn't know what to say. Well, lo and behold, and this is a true story, at the end of the weekend, or before the weekend, either or, Pop Kelly would go around and tap the beer kegs. Well, some of them had been in the coolers for a while, so we had to make sure that they were not spoiled. So Pop would take a hit of them, and he would tell me. He'd say, hey, and this is Pop talking, said, that goddamn beer keg out in the Melody Barn's flat. And I would go, thanks, Pop, it's called quality control. So I go back to John O, and I tell him, because that was the truth. And you know what he said? Wow. He said, wow. Something like, really? Now, I couldn't have made that up. Pop had to tell me, because I was asking him about something, and I always knew he kept a six-pack in his trunk. So I didn't know if he was nipping that or no. Because he would report to me. I'd have him inventory, and because Pop come into work early, and he would get that stuff done, and hey, that goddamn beer barn is flat. And I go, oh, then we got to get rid of that keg. Did you mark it? Hell yes. He said, if I can't drink it, nobody can. So John O, when I told him, was totally accepted it. He says, well, he doesn't get close, because he had a follow-up then. He said he doesn't get close around the customers, does he? And I go, no. I said, you know, Pop's, I said, he's a behind the scenes guy. I said, no. And he goes, okay, good. He said, and see, that's how J.O. would come into some things. So I always was admired him about that kind of an approach. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a prejudger. Mm-hmm. He was always given the benefit of the doubt. Now, I dare say, I saw him mad a couple times, and I wouldn't want to be on that end of the equation, but he more than not would give you the benefit of the doubt. And I really think Mr. Clay, John O, would stick up for the little guy too. And that's a trait. When I said, like my dad, I'm proud of him in a lot of ways. He was always in there for the little guy. If there was somebody that didn't have what he had, I remember my mom and dad giving money to some neighbor people that didn't have enough to buy groceries, and they would buy them groceries and things like that. And that was always something that stuck in my mind that he was willing to do. So I hope that answered it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Clays Park, in a lot of ways, was an ideal job for me. It allowed me a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility. It allowed me to make a lot of decisions, a lot of mistakes, without really hanging myself because of the good people that were there. Work to live, don't live to work. And if you have a job that you overall like, and you're making a respectable living at it, value that. Because I can tell you that out of 10 people you talk to, probably 7 of them aren't happy with their work anyway. Not necessarily the money, but with their work. And you spend about a third of your life at work. So